Good morning, gorgeous. Yes, you. Welcome back to Rosie Rooted and Rising. I'm Rosie Brown, and as always, I am grateful you've chosen to spend a little time with me today. One of the things I've learned this season is that life doesn't always change because we finally find the right answer. Sometimes it changes because we become honest enough to admit the question we've really been asking. That's where I've been over the last couple of weeks. If someone looked at my calendar, they would probably think everything was moving along just fine. I've been working my part time job, taking notary assignments, keeping up with everyday responsibilities, and doing all the things that make a person look productive. The problem is, looking productive and making progress aren't always the same thing. I didn't realize how true that was until I noticed something I had been avoiding. Rosie's Real Estate Solutions wasn't moving forward because I wasn't giving it the attention it needed. I wasn't questioning the business. I wasn't losing faith in what I was building. I simply wasn't giving it the time and focus I knew it deserved. And that bothered me. Not because I didn't know what to do, because I did. A while ago, I created a 30-day strategic plan to help me become more intentional about growing my business. I even told my therapist that I thought I was ready to start working through it. The plan was sitting exactly where I left it. Every day I intended to open it, something else seemed to take priority. Before long, I found myself doing what so many of us do. I was taking care of everything that demanded my attention while quietly postponing the work that mattered most to me. I don't think that happens because we stop believing in ourselves. I think it happens because our own dreams rarely shout the loudest. Bills have deadlines, jobs have schedules, people need answers. Life keeps moving. The work we've chosen for ourselves usually waits patiently until we decide to come back to it. And that's exactly what my business had been doing. As I sat with all of that, I realized something else. The feeling was familiar. It reminded me of where I was emotionally before I received that unexpected email from DCP&P. I thought I had worked through those emotions. I thought once I accepted the possibility that a more stable job might become part of my future, some of the internal tension would settle down. Instead, I found myself carrying it again. Not because anything bad had happened, because uncertainty has a way of finding its voice when we stop paying attention to what matters most. Right in the middle of all of that, I met with the office manager at a real estate brokerage. She was generous with her time, encouraging me and willing to share what she had learned through her own experience. I appreciated that more than she probably realized. As we talked, I explained that I had passed the real estate exam back in February, but I wasn't interested in building a career as a sales agent. My goal has always been to grow Rosie's Real Estate Solutions. Passing my test strengthened my understanding of the business, but it never changed the direction I wanted to go. Then our conversation took an unexpected turn. I mentioned that I speak Spanish well enough to communicate with Spanish speaking clients, although writing it fluently is still something I'm working on. Her expression changed immediately. She began telling me about an agent in one of the other offices who works exclusively with the Hispanic community and often needs someone to bridge that communication gap. She asked if I would bring some business cards and flyers by the office because she thought it would be a good opportunity for people to know who I am and what I do. I felt encouraged. Sometimes another person recognizes a strength you've overlooked simply because it's become an ordinary part of who you are. Then she made one comment that stayed with me. She said that in this area, I probably wouldn't make more than $400 for a transaction. She may have been talking about her brokerage, or she may have been talking about the market. I honestly don't know because I never asked. What surprised me wasn't her opinion, it was how quickly I allowed it to affect mine. On the drive home, I caught myself wondering whether I had misunderstood the business. Was I expecting something unrealistic? Had I been looking at my future through the wrong lens? Those thoughts lingered much longer than I wanted them to. Looking back now, I don't think that meeting created my uncertainty. I think it revealed it. When you're confident, advice becomes information. When we're already questioning ourselves, the very same advice can begin to sound like a verdict. That realization followed me for several days, and eventually I understood that I didn't need another opinion. I needed enough quiet to hear my own thoughts again. A few days later, I realized I needed to step away. Not because I wanted to escape my life. I wasn't running from my responsibilities, and I wasn't trying to avoid making decisions. I was simply tired. I hadn't taken a real break since last summer, and somewhere along the way, I had stopped paying attention to what that was costing me. So what did I do? I went to Ocean City, Maryland. There wasn't a grand plan behind it. I just knew I needed a few days where my schedule wasn't telling me what had to happen next. The first morning I walked onto the beach, I noticed something almost immediately. Nothing was asking anything of me. There were no emails waiting for an answer, no deadlines, no phone calls, no pressure to figure out what my future should look like. Just the sound of the waves coming in and going back out again. I don't know how long I sat there, but it was long enough for my thoughts to slow down, and long enough to recognize how noisy my own mind had become. For weeks, I had been carrying conversation that hadn't happened yet. I had been trying to decide what I would do if DCP&P called, wondering how quickly my business would grow, questioning whether I was making the right choices, and replaying the meeting with the office manager more times than I cared to admit. None of those questions had answers, yet I had been expecting myself to find them anyway. That was so exhausting. The beach didn't solve any of it. What it did give me was enough distance to recognize that I had been asking today's version of myself to solve tomorrow's problems. No wonder I couldn't focus. No wonder my strategic plan stayed on my desk. My attention had been scattered in a dozen different directions before I ever sat down to work. There was one afternoon when I remember looking out over the water and thinking, what if nothing is wrong? That question surprised me. I had been acting as though every delay meant I was failing. Every slow week meant I was falling behind. Every unanswered question meant I was missing something important. But what if this season isn't evidence that I'm off course? What if it's simply asking me to grow differently than I expected? That thought stayed with me. I started thinking about all the energy I've been spending trying to predict something that hadn't happened yet. Would I return to DCP&P? Would Rosie's real estate solutions finally gain momentum? Would the next conversation become my next client? I couldn't answer any of those questions sitting on that beach. I could, however, decide I wanted to return home. That felt like a much better use of my energy. Somewhere during those few days, I stopped believing I had to figure everything out before I could move forward. The pressure I had been putting on myself began to lift. Not all at once, just enough for me to breathe again. When I packed my suitcase to leave, I wasn't carrying a new business strategy. I wasn't coming home with a perfectly mapped out future. I was bringing something back that I hadn't realized I had been missing: a quieter mind. Sometimes that's the beginning we need. As I drove home from Ocean City, Maryland, I realized I wasn't bringing back a new plan. I was bringing back a different perspective. The question I had before I left were still there. DCP&P was still in the back of my mind. Rosie's real estate solutions was still waiting for my attention. My responsibilities hadn't disappeared. What changed wasn't my situation, it was the way I was carrying it. Tomorrow morning, I'll meet with a real estate agent over Zoom to learn about her business and see whether I can support her as her transaction coordinator. I don't know where that conversation will lead, and for the first time in a while, I'm comfortable leaving that unanswered. My job isn't to predict the outcome. My job is to be prepared, to listen well, and to continue showing people the value I know I can provide. When I get home, I'll also open the strategic plan that's been sitting on my desk. I'm not looking at it as something I failed to complete. I'm looking at it as a place to begin again. There's a difference. We spend so much time believing that one missed week, one difficult conversation, or one season of uncertainty somehow defines the whole journey, but it doesn't. Growth is usually much quieter than that. It happens every time you choose to come back to what matters instead of giving up on it. That's the lesson I'm taking home with me. Isaiah 30:15 says, "In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength." I've read those words many times over the years, but this week they settled into my heart in a different way. Rest didn't remove my responsibilities. Quietness didn't answer every question. Trust didn't tell me exactly what the future would hold. What it did was remind me that I don't have to carry tomorrow while I'm still living today. Maybe that's something you needed to hear too. If you've been filling every hour with responsibilities while quietly putting your own dream on hold, I hope you're giving yourself permission to pause long enough to remember why you started. The goal isn't to have every answer. The goal is to keep moving toward what matters most. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I appreciate you more than you know. Until next time, sis y hermana, stay rooted, stay blessed, and keep rising. New episodes every Monday morning. If today's episode resonated with you, follow the show, leave a review, and share it with another woman who's rising or someone in your life who needs it. Follow on Spotify or subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss what's next on Rosie, Rooted and Rising.